Let's talk about early voting. We have seen over 7 million Americans already vote, nearly 5 million of those 7 million votes in what are called loosely battleground states. And this includes a representative sample of absentee ballots as well as early voting. Now, I'm going to be voting early tomorrow, Friday, here in Massachusetts. I was going to wait until November 8th to sort of be part of the whole scene. But I had a 15-minute wait to vote in the primary, and I can only imagine that the lines are going to be even longer to vote on November 8th, and I've got to be here to do the show. No time to waste, so I will be voting early. So what do we know so far about early voting? Well, the analysis is that in some states, Democrats have improved their position relative to now in 2012 early voting. And Republicans also have some good news. So the early voting numbers look good for Democrats in North Carolina, in Nevada, and in Arizona. Republicans seem to have some good news out of Iowa, and that is a state that Donald Trump conceivably could win this election. Florida is a really interesting one because both candidates are sort of claiming that Florida is good for them. And it's really the issue because, number one, Florida is the state most likely to swing the election. No one state is more than 50% likely to swing the election. But if you look at Nate Silver's 538.com, Florida is the state with the highest chance of swinging the election. I think something like 15 or 17%. So the Trump campaign is saying, oh, early voting is helping us in Florida. It's true that there are more Republicans than Democrats that have done early voting in Florida. But here's the confusion. The Republican early voting in Florida, their lead is far smaller than it was in 2012. So Republicans are saying, hey, if you look at raw early voting totals in Florida, more Republicans have voted than Democrats. Democrats are looking at Florida and saying, in early voting at this point in 2012, we were way down to Republicans, and this time we're barely down to Republicans. So it's really a matter of how you want to look at the numbers. And I, Pat, am finding the Democratic argument here far more compelling, which is last year, Obama won Florida, and you were down big to Republicans at this point in early voting. And now you're barely down to Republicans. That to me seems like an improvement for Democrats.
Yeah, I think all signs at this point point to a Trump landslide loss. And I mean, at this point, he'd have to win all the swing states and pick off something like Pennsylvania or New Hampshire or Colorado, states where he's down like 10%.
And it's been increasingly suggested, including by Senator Rand Paul, who was one of the 17 original Republican candidates for president this year, that the polls showing Hillary ahead are designed to suppress turnout. He was on a program called the Tom Roten Morning Show on 800 WVHU, West Virginia. I don't understand how this argument makes sense. Let's listen to it and see if we can figure it out.
But what about the national polls that have Hillary way out in front? Here we are less than 2 weeks before the election. Can Donald Trump pull this off?
You know, I think sometimes polling is done to dampen election turnout. So when Trump says the thing's rigged, I'm not sure exactly what he means, and I'm not sure I always agree with him, but I do think that when we say over and over someone can't win, that is a form of rigging in the sense that it is designed to suppress turnout.
This is genuine BS from Rand Paul. You're talking about multiple overlapping levels of nonsense. First of all is the idea that if you think your candidate is losing, you're less likely to vote. That may be true, but it could be argued that if you think your candidate is down, you'll actually go vote, right? I mean, Pat, I think that you could make the case that if you really don't want Hillary Clinton to win, and you keep hearing that Hillary is winning, maybe you would stay home if you think Trump has no shot, but maybe you would be more inspired and motivated to go out and vote.
Yeah, Trump's doing no favors to himself. He's only suppressing his own vote. And we know that Rand Paul, too, is up for re-election for his Senate seat.
There is the concern on the Clinton side that if people think she's well ahead, they won't vote thinking she doesn't need their vote. So that's also an angle, which is it's a really risky strategy for Hillary Clinton to say, oh, let's rig the polls. How she would do it, I don't know. Let's rig the polls to make it seem like we're winning, because that also, Pat, could make it so that Hillary supporters say, oh, even though she's really only up by one, the polls have been rigged to say she's up 10, she doesn't need my vote anymore. I think that Rand Paul's allegations here make no sense because it's to Hillary Clinton's detriment to do this.
Yeah, we know that if a contest is close, that drives up voter turnout, because if you look at swing states over the years,
right,
there's like a 10% higher turnout rate for states that are competitive.
There's the polls themselves also, which are done by pollsters. And number one, there's no evidence that pollsters are skewing polls to show Hillary ahead. Number two, there's no really good reason to think that pollsters would do that. And number three, there's really no realistic explanation as to why Hillary Clinton would want that. The best way, as Pat just pointed out, to skew polls in order to help someone would be if you're ahead, if you're Hillary Clinton and you're really up 8, you would want to skew the polls to show that they're tied, because then people thinking she needs my vote would not stay home. So this entire hypothesis from Rand Paul really doesn't pass the smell test. It smells like BS, and it absolutely is.